Good afternoon to everyone listening out there to Adamimogo 93.1 FM. This is the follow-up, and this is where we get to review matters that affect us as Nigerians, both home and abroad. Now, my guest today is someone who is defined by a mantra, four-letter word, care, uh, passion, integrity, empathy, reliance, and reliability and resilience. And this mantra, according to him, he has made this submission in several places as is the architecture behind setting up the N-Power program, which the federal government, which was the initiative of the federal government in recruiting about 500,000 young people from the streets and putting them into areas where they found jobs in the education sector, the health sector, and in several other areas where they were able to earn a stipend, make some measurable impact, and also get themselves busy at that point. He's one of Nigeria's foremost voices on human capital development. And just recently, he spearheaded a roundtable conversation with key stakeholders on the skills gap in Nigeria. Yes, employers definitely want people to come on board, but if they don't find the people with the right skills, it means that Nigeria has a human capital crisis. And that would be the core of the conversation on this episode. My guest is also a former senior special assistant for President Muhammadu Buhari on job creation. So he is more or less the authority on that uh, when you consider what has happened or what the developments have been in the past few years. He is Mr. Falabi Imoukhuede. Mr. Falabi Imoukhuede, thank you for joining us on the follow-up.
Thanks, Sam. It's good to be here.
Thank you. Been a while since you left government, but I know that you're still in that mix. Tell us what is different from when you were SSC on job creation and now that you still work in the office of the vice president, spearheading in the delivery unit.
Well, I think the simple thing is, first, I am a citizen of Nigeria, and I think that's the most important title any one of us can have, the office of the citizen. And in that office, as a citizen of Nigeria, I certainly straddled the private sector as a core private sector man or a private citizen. I did my bit, and along the line, even while in the private sector, I had always built this nexus around the public and private, the public-private partnerships. And so it's again that launched me into the public sector, just like you referred, as senior special assistant to the president then on job creation. But then again, that's not my first foray in the public space or public sector space. And the difference then is that I had a title, I had an official title, but now post 2023, back as a private citizen of Nigeria and a private citizen in the office of the citizen. But then again, we still remain relevant in the ecosystem. And so currently, yes, through the funding of the European Union to the Nigerian government and specifically to the office of the vice president, I help in what is called the strategic partnerships, leading strategic partnerships and coordination for efforts of the government around job creation.
You've been at the the core of helping to create jobs in Nigeria, but Nigeria, we all know, has an unemployment problem, and that rate is pretty high. How do you describe that sort of paradox where the government keeps rolling out programs? Employers say, oh, we have spaces to fill, but then the stats are saying something different.
Yeah. Well, I think there lies the role that I currently feel, which is really, so when you look at the word strategic partnerships and then coordination, the problem you've described certainly means that there is some missing strategy, certainly partnerships, missing links in partnerships, and certainly there needs to be a coordinated affair. My position when it comes to jobs and job creation, my position really has always been, it is not it is not the role of government alone to create jobs. There is the place of government in job creation, because in itself, government itself is an employer of labor. So, but it's not the place of government alone to create jobs. It is the core place of government to ensure that you have an enabling environment, right from the policies to the institutions to the to the institutions to the regulations and everything that enables commerce.
Right.
That remains the primary role of government. In a market economy, which we subscribe to in the economy of Nigeria, certainly it then becomes the role of the markets for there to be jobs. And like I say, once the supply and demand, once the economics do their work, there would always be jobs will be created. So I think that when we talk about job creation, we need to dissect it properly. And that's why in the roundtable you referred to that we hosted in March in Abuja, we called it the skills and the jobs ecosystem, because we need to unpack and we need to disaggregate properly. What we have, and this is again not new, this even predates my days in government. It's actually, for me, I think I stumbled on this whole concept of skilling, Skill Up, which was the name of my brand at the time, and it still is, because it's still a brand that is running. So days when we started analyzing the problem of skills or jobs or mismatch is the fact that we understand that it has to be demand led. So when we talk about, and this is what speaks to why you talk about government keep running out different programs, but then it doesn't look like it's sustainable or it goes really deep. My view is that it has to be demand led. We need to know what it is that we want to train for. Who is it we want to train for? So in my view, it has to be the industry, the markets, who are the ones informing us of the skills that they require. And then based on that, the training system, not just the education system, but the education and training system, let's make it broadly, takes cognizance of those needs of the industry, because you're not just talking about the needs of today. We need to think about the future needs, the skill needs. So they take note of that and then begin to prepare, the talents that will match the need of the industry. That's what brings about matching. Now you realize that just in what I've described, the left needs to speak to the right. There needs to be a bridge to connect it. So I think those are the missing gaps where we have the problems we have.
So before we delve deeper into the gaps, you just mentioned Skill Up, which is a project that you've had to run for a number of time, for a while, where you define what the skills that are most required by employers before you then embark on training. In all these years of running that methodology, what are the skills that you think that, or perhaps that data suggested that is most missing in Nigeria?
So what you find, so good question. The ones that were and still remain till today are technical skills, real technical skills. Because between then and now, you find that some Skill Up started 2012, 2013. So that's an odd, 12, 13 years ago. Content creation was not a big thing at the time, and everything around content creation, even just from video, knowing how to video, knowing how to edit, knowing how to cut, and all of that. But look at it now, there's a preponderance of those skills because, again, a lot of them are self-taught, are self-taught skills. Right. Now, with technical skills, then there was a dearth of it, until now remains a dearth of it because a lot of those skills, there's so little, so much you can do in self-thought. For you to become good or great at it requires a lot of practicals. And so what that tells you is that it's not cheap. And I've often said it, and so, the category of skills that we group them under what we call TVET, technical vocational education. That's not cheap. And because it's not cheap, it's not easy for people to really self-teach themselves because they can't afford it. And as a result of that, the industry continues to lament. We can't find the right people, we can't find the right skills, and we have a huge number. Not everybody again is going to be in content creation and all that. I mean, IT as well, and all of that. So those are the challenges. The short answer to your question is that the real gap is in the middle manpower, the technical skill.
So you mentioned TVET now, and I've had this question about TVET for a very long time. It's not something new, it's something that we've had as far back as the 70s. Government has a way of coming with different policies. You've also had the opportunity to also create some policy, help create some policy around it. What is different from what it used to be and what we have now?
I think the truth of the matter is that we have just not stayed consistent on the things that matter. And by that I mean that if you look at it right now, we don't only have a dearth of technicians, we have a dearth of technical instructors.
Okay.
As in the instructors in the technical colleges that should train these people to know what they are doing. We have a dearth of them. And that's because even as a policy, government really has not invested in training a lot of technical training instructors.
Would that imply that the people in government don't believe so much in it?
Well, again, I wouldn't know why.
No, you've been in that space.
Well, yeah, but again, so there are some challenges that are systemic, and I think I tried to address this a year ago when on another program. I mean, some challenges are very systemic, but yes, the reality is that we are not doing a lot of investment in technical training. I mean, not just the trainees now, but technical instructors. Yes, the instructor training. So that's something and you can't give what you don't have. And a lot of the technical instructors that are very good now, a lot of them they're either approaching age of retirement or they're already retired. So you have that problem already. Now, let's also remember that we are in the days of emerging new trends, wherein technology and automation is also coming into the space. So it used to be that when some 20, 25 years ago, it's motor vehicle. But right now, it's no longer motor vehicle, it's automobile.
Yeah.
So when it was motor vehicle, it's carburetor and all the things. But now it's injector, it's mechatronics, everything now. So again, new skills have come into the same mobility tool that you used to. I mean, it was a motor, it was a motor vehicle, but it's now an automobile. So those are the so my point is that even if we paid limited investments to them, we are not catching up with the trends that should inform at the level at which we should. So when we are not doing that, even just from the basis of maintenance, how then are we investing in what you call local assembly of vehicles, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. So that's what it is.
So is it that gap of government failing to put in sufficient investment? Is that the gap that you are helping to fill by trying to not just draw in funding from international organizations, but also from the private sector?
So again, so yes, one of it. But then again, this is why conversations like this, I also don't want it to reduced to just government, government, government. Yes, government has, like I said earlier, government has its role to play, but then again, there's also the role of the industry, which is includes the private sector and everybody, right? So certainly yes. The essence of the roundtable and the essence of my coordination support role, is really to try and bring everybody to the table and be able to even first and foremost map who is in what value chain. So when you're talking about a skills and jobs ecosystem, for example, and we say, let's give it to the industry that the industry should lead us in what do you need, then the question would be, okay, the industry, what are the skills you need? And the best way I like to analyze them is that run them on verticals, run them on sector by sector, because yes, there are cross-cutting skills that cut across all sectors, but every sector has its own idiosyncrasies and its own peculiarities, right? So if you bring the industry to the room on sector by sector, and again, you can't do all sector at the same time. You will start with priority sectors of the economy. If you look at the renewed hope now of the current administration, you certainly know that they have priority sectors. Innovation, technology is certainly one of the priority sectors of this present administration, not just as a sector, but also as an enabler for many other sectors. You certainly can see that agri and food security is another sector, and infrastructure, which obviously has construction in it, housing in it. So when you look at those priority sectors, even if you stay with the 5 or 6 sectors that cut across is 8-point renewal agenda, you start with that and get them in the room. Once they map what it is that they require, then the next thing will be, okay, how much of these skills do we have? How much of it do we have? How much? So when you know how much you have, then okay, then maybe because you have enough, maybe all you just need is some remedial retraining and things like that. How much do we not have? Oh, we do not have this. Then okay, who are those who are in the value chain of training? Which is the various skills training, whether it's the skill centers, the technical colleges, the institutional, the employment-based trainings, whatever it is. You get them all again together. Okay, after that, okay, what do we need to do? Who are those that are in certification? The awarding bodies and things like that who are in the certification, also working collaborative with the industry, have to define occupational standards. Level 1, level 2, level 3, and things like that. So those are all the gamut of work that you can't do in isolation, but all the parties need to be in sync with one another. Some skills need more precision than technical manpower. So those are precision skills. Maybe those ones are things that you have to bring in the University Commission and the universities and the research houses and things like that, the engineering teams, because again, the world has gone beyond technical now. We are also at a level of precision engineering, and then of course, as you go in advancement, you are talking about, okay, how do you bring in artificial intelligence? To bring in artificial intelligence to assist in all of this research and big data and all of those things. So again, what the missing link many times is we do all of these right things, but we do them in silos. And so the end result many times is that we work out cross purposes and they become counterproductive.
All right, yeah, great. Let's tilt the conversation a bit towards what you've done specifically.
Yeah.
A lot of people hear about N-Power, but don't know that there was an Afolabi Imoukhuede who basically helped to build this up and conceive this idea. You've written about how you helped set that up in your book, Never an Afterthought. Yeah. By the way, I didn't indicate, but he's also an author. Also another, you indicated how you were able to think about that, come up with a concept note, get development partners into that mix, and how I think the part that struck me the most was you made it clear that you treated this like a private sector enterprise. For those who have not read that book, I'd just like you to walk us through that process a bit.
Yeah. So thank you. And that's basically what we've been speaking about from the beginning of this conversation, and really, there were two things that were akin to the philosophy that guided the Empower program. One of it is what I call the Five Fingers Bridge. And that's what we started talking about, the industry. And I always say the longest finger of our hands, which is this one, should be the industry leading the effort. And then, of course, but then again, they can't do it on their own. So you then have government, you have the training institutions, you have the trainees, and you have the what's the last one now? So you have the trainees and either like call it five bridge, So government, industry, government, awarding bodies, the awarding bodies. So those are the five partners that really need to come together to be able to really cook a good food, mix the ingredients and come up with a good recipe, again, along the line, then you then have what you then call the cardinals of a sustainable technical vocational education. There's 7 of those, so which starts from data to training to assessment and ends with jobs. The training, the assessment, apprenticeship, and all of that, and ends with jobs. So those are the two cardinals of that I espoused in that book, and also which form the foundation of what we did with the Empower program. Let's understand that the Empower program at the time is one of the social investment program. The government of President Muhammad Buhari obviously invested quite a lot in the social investment program, which we all later know as the National Social Investment Program, which again is beyond just an intervention. Now it's actually been set up as an act of parliament into an agency, and but I do, it's still a bit skeletal in the takeoff as an agency. But then the point then is that we also started the Empower program then at a point in time also where Nigeria went into recession in 2015, and of course came out in 2016, late 2015, and came out in 2016, out of recession in 2016. But part of the reasons also that we needed to spend our way out of a recession. And because if there's anything we know about recession, consumer buying power reduces. So what governments all over the world do is to spend their way out of recession, just to be able to get money in the pockets of people, to be able to drive consumption. And that's exactly what the Empower program did. And it was a massive program. But then just to be able to see, because what we also did was to put our investments where our critical needs are. So it wasn't just by flip of a finger, we said they were going to be educators, those who worked in schools are teaching assistants, or those who worked in the health centers, or those who work in agri. And then we had a few of them who also worked at the time in driving the VADES program, the Voluntary Asset Declaration program, and things like that. The whole point is that when you have a need, and you also need to make such specific investments, strategy comes that you drive your investments towards where your needs are. And it worked massively because with every of the over 300,000 that were deployed to our public primary schools across Nigeria, massive impact were felt because it was deployed to where there was a need. And I went around this country and I was in some schools where the head teacher would tell me that aside from this, my full-time permanent teacher of English in this school, without these 20 of your volunteers, as we called them at the time, teaching volunteers or teaching assistants, English and language teaching in this school suffered and things like that, so it was even in health centers and what have you. So my point is that's how you drive a sustainable investment. You put an investment in where you need it most. However, the challenge then remains that because all of this, primary place of assignment across country were not federal government owned, certainly they could not have been the popular word then permanent, permanent talks. There was no way federal government was going to sit in Abuja and decide that the 2,000 of you that are in Ebonyi State, you are going to remain permanent and things like that. That wasn't going to be. Now, perhaps, fast forward, if that program ran in what is currently going on with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu now that the governors have more money in their pockets with fuel subsidy gone, I'm sure it would have been a different story because the governors, there was real value in what the young, young guys and young ladies were doing. There was real value in what they were doing. So there would probably have been no conversation around trying to retain the best of the best.
I'll show you. Considering that even now, the level of employment across state levels remain relatively low.
Well, again, I'm just arguing based on the fact
probability.
I'm just arguing based on the fact that they have more money in their heads. And now, right? So, and these guys were solving real problems. But having said that there again comes the issues around the structural problems of our employment. Because these are real guys solving real problems where there are real gaps, and yet they couldn't get employment. You begin now, what was that? That wasn't because federal government did not signpost where the problem was, or the gaps were, or that these guys are real problem solvers. It was because the federal government has no authority structurally to solve that problem. And the federal government had no mandate to force any subnational or any state governor to do that. So that's just an example of the structural problems of our employment. Now, the question now is, how come then do we have states that have schools under their jurisdiction and there are no teachers in those schools, and it's not as though you do not know that there are no teachers in those schools? Again, that's not a question. Anybody can ask a question.
Was there an attempt to get states to have a full buy-in?
Oh, certainly.
Into the program.
Oh, certainly. Oh, there was massive buy-in. Massive buy-in. Oh, no, I mean, there's a program right now.
It was simply a funding problem.
I don't know what the problem was. I won't speak for the state, but in terms of buying, there was massive buying, of course. We had a steering committee that had a lot of ministers. It was chaired by the vice president then, Professor Shibajo, and obviously had a lot of ministers. And then, because the vice president also chaired the NEC, so every NEC meeting, the social investment gives report. So there was massive buying. In fact, even from all, regardless of party line, Rivers State, being a PDP state at the time, got the highest number of volunteers of the Empower program. Anambra State, being an Abga state at the time, was the first to sign up for the school feeding program. So there was massive buying all across Nigeria. That's one program everybody will tell you. So when you said even earlier that, so people do know Afolabi Imoukhuede, they just don't know me in person. So my name, once you hear, perhaps once you hear Empire and you hear, oh, is it the Afola? So it's just a connection. But yes, but again, I've just used that to explain that our employment or unemployment issue have quite a bit of structural issues. One of the other structural issues about unemployment in Nigeria is the fact that our population growth is exponential in geometric proportions. But our economic growth is nominal. What is projected to grow at 4% this year, still doing better than most African economies. It was at 3-point-something% last year. Projected, I think we ended at about 3.8, projected
3.7.
Projected to be about 4% this year. So I'm sure if you check our population growth, is a double digit. So how do you really not understand that you're going to have another big structural issue there, wherein there will be more people than the jobs available. And that's why you therefore see that, and that's not a problem we can solve decisively quickly. Because again, I've argued on your program now and many programs in the last 10 years that in solving that problem, then comes in our ethno religious society, because some of our religions frowns against birth control. Certainly, our culture also frowns against birth control. So, if you then, how do you then solve the problem? Population growing double digits, economy growing minimal single digits. So, that's why with economies like Nigeria, once you understand those realities, there are then a few things that we don't have too many options. Our options are very limited. And one of those core options that we must take seriously is technical vocational education training. That's why it can be sickening that people still, you want to do projects, construction or whatever project, you are importing artisans or technical people into the country to do it. It's
I recall that the roundtable session, the Minister of Housing, Architect Dangiwa, came and then said there was a massive shortage. I think for me that was perhaps the first time I would hear the minister admit that there was a massive shortage within the construction sector, and that had slowed a lot of things down massively. But then you then go to the 3MTT, that's the 3 million, the 3MTT program. And you hear the program director say about 1 million people applied. We can only accommodate 30,000.
Yeah.
So it shows
cumulatively now, I was at their partners meeting about a week and a half ago. Cumulatively now, maybe 150,000 have been trained. Yeah.
And then you see that there's interest.
Yeah.
Funding is also a problem.
Yeah.
So we don't have a choice. We have a challenge. Yeah. But then how then do we? Was there an immediate fix?
So that's
an immediate fix.
Yeah. So that's the conundrum, right? And that's why I say that. And I modeled how with the Empower program or the social investment program, we're able to drive investments to where the needs and the gaps are, and it solved both problems. It put money in people's hands, not dash, because they worked and earned for it, apart from the conditional cash transfer, which is for aged, widow, and all that. So that's what it is. We and I'm sure, of course, in today's administration, we understand that that the president is a numbers man, he's an accountant, he's an economist, so he understands numbers, he understands the economy. And if there's anything about economics, that there's no resource that is infinite. So it's always limited resources, but multiple interest juggling for limited resources. Yeah. So I'm sure it's that balancing act that we need to do to be able to juggle our investments to where you can get the maximum output. And so yes, programs like the 3MTT certainly do need more investment. TVET programs, you were at the roundtable as well. One of our take home from there, the communique, is about the TVET fund. To be able to really drive deeper investments into the TVET and turn our TVET to production hubs. So which again will solve real problems and will create real sustainable wealth for people. So that's really what it is. So I think that, like you've just answered, we have very limited choices because of the structural constraints. Not that they cannot be solved, but they perhaps cannot be solved easily. But because once you accept those structural constraints, then you then know that what he's doing is that he's reducing your options. And so I don't know of fewer options that we have than one, addressing TVET, and TVET for real, for depth and in large scale. And certainly The 3MTT program, which is also bringing using technology, at depth and at large scale. Systemic, bringing in systemic coordination, bringing in strategy, and institutionalizing these things. That's really the way out.
Let's track back a bit to the Empower program.
Yeah.
Are there any regrets that you have with that particular program?
Well, interesting. I don't think so. Well, perhaps I don't think so. I wouldn't classify them as regrets. I think maybe I won't classify them as regrets. I would say that it's quite painful that we're not able to, as a country, really tap into the great wins, of that program and refine, review, expand. Do you understand? And that's so it's not a regret because the program, oh my goodness, that you still see real life.
Let me give you a review
Yeah.
that somebody shared
Yeah.
with me. He called it a waste of billions of naira.
Mhm.
Why? He says, "Oh, the program people ended up with yes jobs, a stipend, a tablet, and at the end of it all, they went back home to being jobless. At the end of that period,
I don't
So-
agree. I don't agree. So obviously, the person who said that doesn't know the program and doesn't know the people.
Mm.
So I don't agree, and it's not true. Because from day one, and the records are there, I had what you call Facebook live chats. We didn't have
Yeah.
Instagrams or this world then, but all we had was Facebook, and I always held Facebook live chats with the volunteers every month, and they're still there. They're not deleted, so you can search it out. From day one that you sign on every volunteer into the Empower program, two things were my mantra: count backwards. Don't count forward, count backwards. 24, 23, 22, down to zero, because there's an exit day. And so what it therefore meant is I maximize every moment. Now it was a learn, walk, and earn into exit for either entrepreneurship or job. So in other words, if you wanted to go, the job route was an employability route. And if you wanted to go entrepreneurship, was also an avenue to save little money and all that. And did they do? Yes. And did they form a lot of cooperatives? Yes. That are still working to today? Yes. Many success stories, but I only featured a few, obviously, in the limited pages of a book. They are still success stories till today. There are many that have gone on to do PhD that I'm still in touch with in the US, all over the globe, in China, in UK, and all that. So no one can tell me that anyone, if you know those who were in the program, no, there's no one that went back and was worse than before. You may say you didn't land your dream job. Yes, I agree with you. But that you were worse than before, no. Because I know a few, even in the Abuja, one of them even moderating was one of the what you call rapporteurs at the round table which you were in. He may not have landed his dream job, but he has a car of his own that he does Uber during the day while supporting his wife, who is an entrepreneur, and they're keeping the home going. So you understand? So they're real stories. And I think what I'd expected, and maybe sometime in now and the future of it, is for us to really do a focus group of those beneficiaries. Now, let me also, maybe before I say no, I don't agree, let me qualify. There is a batch C that I know nothing about, which is the ones that were brought onto the program after I signed off on the program. I signed off on that program June 1, 2020. At that time, we had 500,000 and we have over 100,000 technical trainees and all that. I mean, those ones I can't speak about. But those who came in, I think some additional hundreds of thousands came in after then. I wouldn't know their own story. So maybe they are the ones that the reviewer is talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm interested in what was the backstory, of you signing up for the program.
Oh well, I mean, again, let's understand that one of the things we fought for and we do know is the fact that interventions remain interventions. They never cut deep. Um, the only time things become, and if you're speaking about, again, a country, a system that has structural issues, the only time you can begin to make changes are when you make things institutional. So we were the ones, it wasn't another. We were the same ones who championed the fact that we needed to institutionalize social investment. All credits to Mrs. Miriam Owais, the special advisor, who I like to call Excellency. And she would tell me, Excellency, we are Falabi Excellency, we are things like that. So we all championed and, in fact, did spearheaded the first few drafts of the bill to the National Assembly. So it was a plus and remains a plus that the social investment program is now institutionalized, even in codified into law as an agency of government. So I think that is that, right? But the unfortunate thing is the fact that the president, in the second tenure of blessed memory, obviously, who in his view was, okay, since we said we wanted it institutionalized, then thought in his wisdom at the time to move it into a ministry. And he was obviously in the ministry, then it became an institution.
The Ministry of Humanitarian
Affairs. But by the time you move it to the ministry, that already lost all its, because what perhaps, we as leaders, we do have short sight. We do have blind spots, and that's why you need credible advisors. Perhaps the oversight of the advisors at the time is they did not understand why it worked well when it was in the presidency. It was only one thing and one thing only: the convening power of the presidency. You put a program like that I just spoke to you about, impacted in education. The Minister of Education was in the steering committee. Impacted in health. The Minister of Health was in the steering committee. Impacted on agri. The Minister of Agri was in the steering committee. Certainly, he was a labor and employment intervention. The Minister of Labor and Intervention was deputy chair of the steering committee. So alternate chair, once the vice president is not able to chair, he chairs. Certainly, it was our budget was in the budget Ministry of Budget. So the Minister of Budget was in the steering committee as another alternate chair, budget and planning. Minister of Finance was certainly a core member, another alternate chair in the steering committee. Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment was in the steering committee. Minister of Works, the RF at the time, was in the steering committee. So we had no less than 10 or so ministers in the steering committee to give vision and impetus to a project like that, because it cuts across different different ministries or different strata. And then remember that we are not intervening in federal-owned institutions. We're intervening in every state. The only place federal can use might is FCT. FCT is one out of the other 36 states and FCT. We're intervening in states that we have no jurisdiction. And why did we have the power? Was also because the chair of the steering committee, being the vice president, also chairs NEC. So we go on the field, we encounter whatever, we're able to bring it back to the steering committee where the HE chairs, and the steering committee says, oh, well, Mr. Vice President, you chair NEC, please bring it to NEC. So the lack of understanding that is the reason why anyone can advise you to take it to a ministry. The day you took it to the ministry, he died a natural death, even though he's still alive. Why? Because you lost all that convening power. Except for moral suasion and maturity. You, a minister, me, a minister, you can't force me to come to a meeting.
So This went on for a while. I think since the beginning of the second term,
Yeah.
we saw this play out.
Yeah.
Was there no time when the president at the time, later President Muhammadu Buhari, got that feedback and said, okay, perhaps we can make some bit of adjustment or correction?
then
Or is
again,
it that he never got a
But
feedback?
then again, that's also the thing about government, right? You know, it's it can take a while for government to wield or to, use the power in that pen. Once you have, it's not easy to reverse. So you moved it to a ministry by the power of that pen to move it to a ministry. Do you know what has happened? The head of service has instituted a permanent secretary into that ministry. There's levels of government that has gone up and all that. So it's not, so for us, because we have the foresight, is also the reason why we could see the problem ahead. But some problems are not seen until experienced. And so for those who maybe are listening or watching and always ask the question, what was the difference between the Empower or the social investment in the days of Afolabi Imoukhuede in government and this batch C that I just said to you that I may not be able to answer? I've just told you the clear difference. And so it had nothing to do with any quest for control or power, or maybe because there was some largesse. It had nothing to do with it. You had all that even when it was in the ministry. Oh, in fact, perhaps even more money than we saw in our own tenure, in our own time managing the program. But you didn't get the results. So that's it.
Interestingly, I was having a conversation this morning and somebody came and said, a caller, called in and said, the private sector under this current administration, yes, there's more time to plan the parameters, the policy shifts has brought in some bit of stability, but some members of the private sector, some companies are still feeling the heat. Operational cost is relatively high, and we want them to bring their money to train people to have the skills so that they can make further input. How are you convincing them right now to do that?
It's going to be tough. It's never been easy. It was tough then, it's tougher now. So let's get this straight. However, what always happens is always about it's always about value. And because in the private sector it's about value and exchange for value. So where you see value and you want to, so let's backtrack. If the deployment we talked about, as we did say about plugging them in public-private schools, now Jubilee Fellows, they plug them in organizations, private organizations, but remember, not in the volume in which we were. We're talking 200,000 when we are talking 500,000. But let's just, for the singular value, the one-to-one, one person plugged in public-private school under Empower, one person plugged in Jubilee Fellows. Nobody will tell that employer to retain a good SAM. It's natural instinct. I've seen value in Sam working with me. In fact, my business blossomed because Sam is in this team. You're not going, it's natural instinct to the private sector employer to keep Sam. But look at the story in the Empire Day. The state governors did see value. The principal saw value. The students are recognizing Uncle Sam as the Empire volunteer. But then, Uncle Sam was not retained. And you speak to the governor says, it's beyond me. Don't ask me what that means, because I don't think I know what it means. And it means even the governor may not know what he said. He may not even know what he said. But that's the core difference, right? And so that's where the cheese is with the conversation when you're talking with the private sector. If they see value, they don't argue with value. And that was why And that's why I said in our quest to get more private sector support, even in the Jubilee Fellows or even just in the jobs ecosystem. Once there's value, it's really about pitching the value. Once there's value, you won't argue it. Now, you may then come to quantum. That's when, because again, the instinct of the private sector man is about doing more with less, and it's about leveraging. So why do I want to have 4 people around the table doing work that one man plus tech can do? So you may therefore never be able to win that private sector to get 4 just because you want to count the numbers. But you probably can convince him with some incentives to get to pick 2. And that's how countries have also done it. So because the next thing there is incentives. And that's why when I was also doing some advisory work to another program that I won't mention because it didn't really pick up in the pre-advisory work, then I'd already reached out to my good friend Taiwo Oyedele, now Minister of State, and I said to him, and within a less than a minute conversation, he caught it. Because I said, listen, what I'm trying to do here is going to require us incentivizing the private sector. And you know how tax is one of those ways. Because if I know that I only need 1 person, but I need you really to get 2, 3 people, then incentivize me to do it. And tax incentive is one of those ways. So certainly it's always about, for private sector, it's always about value and incentives. And those were public speeches of Abubakar Sulaiman, the CEO of Sterling, at the NGFP 2.0 flag off. He said it there, right, in the presence of the Vice President. Those are the 2 things for the private sector. We see value, and that's what we retained. We didn't retain as much as we needed because we felt that the quality can be improved, and we need to be part of that whole quality assurance from the beginning. Remember when I talked about the industry and the role of industry through the value chain? So he said that. But once you then do that, then certainly the next thing is that you need to incentivize us. Because it said in the room that day, you all tend to say development partners are good friends from the EU, from the Germany and all that. We are also development partners, even though we're private sector, but we are fellow development partners because we are building this nation together. So that's the context. And once we get the context at scale with the right actors in the room, you will see changes.
All right, just before we wrap up this conversation, I just need you to speak briefly about the current status of the NJFP program. And to also talk about, I recall that the last session, the Vice President talked about building a 200 billion naira basket fund. Yes, to support the objectives of the program. Has that kicked off yet?
Well, of course, yes. The conversations have kicked off. Certainly, there have been a lot of state engagements now. So I know I've been part of Abia, I've been part of Kaduna, I've been part of Cross River. So I've been part of at least a few of those, and there are many more of those going. As you know, UNDP is their own bread and butter 9 to 5 baby, right? So, but just from a stakeholder support perspective, state engagements are going on because the whole goal is that the portion of government coming in won't just come from the Ministry of Budget and National Planning, federal. The Vice President's vision is that we would, and that's why it's called basket fund. The federal government will put their own. And the easiest or the easier of the hard is always going to be the federal government. It's, once the federal government is convinced and they signed off, they will put. But if you look at it from counterpart funding of UBEC, how many states are drawing down on that money? There are very few.
Is there a state that has shown sufficient commitment? Maybe not in terms of funding yet,
Oh no!
commitment
Yeah, so that's
to.
why I said the conversation. Abia, for example, is certainly it's one of those leaders in the park who's clear
Okay.
about what he wants, and even has said these are the sectors I want you guys to focus in terms of curating priorities for my state.
Okay.
So yeah, so in terms of interest, yes, it's the state interest is growing, and the goal is that before the expiration of the support from the EU, which would expire, I guess, sometime 2027, or maybe and upwards of June 2027. I don't know the exact calendar. But before the expiration of that, the goal is that the states, I mean, the government portion will be there, which will be federal and some states in increasing proportion. The private sector are already partners because obviously the placements are mostly in private sectors. They do matching. They get 150 from the post. Different private sector pay up to 150 or more, even to the fellows themselves, and give them additional training. I know the ones that have been deployed to some stakeholder partners of ours that have had to even go do some training for them. They didn't pay me. That's on how do you call it, right? It's a conditional support from the employer who has invited me to support them in that, so they get those added plus ons, right? So again, so when you look at it from that perspective, the private sector already, the employer organizations of the private sector are already partners. It is now the monetary support
Commitment.
but that again, like I said to you, the private sector, once they see value, their money will follow. Money will always follow with value.
To wrap up this conversation, skills, people need to learn skills. We have a shortage of instructors and also a shortage of learners. For somebody who has just finished writing their senior secondary school exams and they're considering their next options, what will you say to them based on what you know about the system now and what is required in the market?
So I think that good question. Thank you. And perhaps I should, this is something that with my friends in the ministry, federal ministry, but then again, also at state, and since this is going all on the air that can go global anywhere. I think what it is that's actually one of the areas where we need to liberalize our educational pathways. The biggest challenge we have, another structural constraint we have with our unemployment issue is the dead end pathways that we have, which is almost like you come out of secondary school, you do jam, you have to go through university before you are considered that you are somebody in society. Meanwhile, every other country considers multiple pathways. So I could finish school. I don't need to be jammed and jammed too many times before I can seem to continue
Progress.
in a career path, right? I can decide to go technical vocation. I can actually then start working as that plumber or whatever, and they are what you called, verifiable work experience that counts, and then later down the line, 10 years down the line, I may want to then, I'm now more settled. I may now want to continue educational pathways. Not then you tell me to go back and write jam. There's something you should be able to do direct entry because you have what you call recognized past led prior learning, which would have come from experience and all that. Now those are reforms that I know that the Board of Technical Education has been championing through under the Ministry of Education, Federal Ministry of Education, which is the new revised qualification framework, the NSQF as they call it. So those are the reforms that need to take roots. I know it's done structurally and the framework is there and there are competition around it, but it needs to become a beer parlor conversation and it needs to be tested, where people can really. And once you do that, it actually unburdens the economy, even unburdens the statistics, because most people, their mental understanding, if they are not yet in that 9 to 5 job in an office like this, they don't believe they're employed. Yet they are earning more than the people in this office through their Uber that they are doing, through their global delivery that they are doing, through their content creation that they are doing for you. They are earning more, but they don't qualify them. If MBS comes to enumerate them, they will say, I'm unemployed. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So that's the reason why, again, when the so it doesn't open another conference. That's the reason why, again, you look at Nigeria economy, people say you don't understand the economy because your number will tell you so much unemployed, so much even underemployed. But you look at consumption, you say, the highest country consuming NSC, consuming beer is us. Where do they get the money if you're unemployed? But the reality is, they are unemployed statistically.
Yeah.
But they actually do earning.
They're earning.
But they just don't consider themselves employed.
Interesting.
So that's what it is. I think that and I've always said this. If you go back way back, probably 2011, one of my very first interviews on channels, many years ago, 2011, I'm a very young AI, they go look for it. I said it there that listen, you post-secondary school, if you know that you've got the head, the cerebral capacity to go academics, please very on go do your jam and move on to the universities or the polytechnics or whatever. But if you know that you're very adept with your hands, please just go and enroll for the TVET programs or the City and Guilds at the time before, because we didn't yet have the whole NSQF we're talking about now. You go and enroll, get your hands dirty, and get busy. Because I knew then we're still in a dead end, but I knew that time was coming when we would open up the way the other worlds have opened up, whereby the fact that I went this way doesn't therefore doesn't shortchange me from a meaningful career down the line. And you see, we just need to sometime look back in the history of this country and see how it was when we were having the indigenous first MD of this, first MD of that, which are Nigerians taking all those positions from the colonial masters.
Yeah.
It was a lot of them was through recognized prior learning. It wasn't because they went to university. I remember my classmate's dad, late Chief Unkulu, who was the first indigenous MD of Unique Insurance, I think at the time, defunct now. He didn't. They all started first class clerk and all that. And he rose through the ranks, through learning on the job, to become the first indigenous Nigerian managing director of that large insurance company, Unique Insurance at the time. So I think, and it's one of the things I used to think about, and one of the things I've heard my mentor say too many times, BRF, sometimes just take a flashback into the past. How did we do it again in this same country? And with that flashback and with the knowledge of the front knowledge, connect the two dots, we'll get an answer.
Talking about flashbacks, I don't want to extend this conversation though, but talking about flashbacks, I know that you're the CEO of a Cambridge educated man who came to help build institutions in Midwest. In the Midwest region, where Nigeria still operates the regional system. Talking about flashbacks, so what are the memories of that
Joe Imoukhuede?
Yes.
Well, I mean,
what do you think you would think of how far we are falling?
Oh my goodness! No, not even. He passed on this same month, April. So 1989 will be what now? 37 years ago, right? Even 37 years ago, he was already lamenting. And quite honestly, things, I don't know. But do we really say things were bad then? But then again, I think it was all about signposting. I mean, you could see where we were headed. If you don't do the right things, at the right time, little wonder why, we shouldn't wonder why we're where we are. So I think I learned a lot from him, as I had mentioned in the book. My days in public service, his spirit was certainly with me every time, because I would just always remember what would Joe Imoukhuede do, or what did Joe Imoukhuede teach us, and things like that. And I'm so proud of that heritage, and it helped me through. And by the grace of God, we've come out. we're still intact. We thank the Lord, So,
But are you looking forward to going back at some point?
I mean, I'm a public servant. I think that's
perhaps the question should be: have you ever given thought to transforming from being a technocrat in governance to being perhaps a politician?
That would be another conversation. So, but I've always said, and this is my argument: every human being is a political animal. I think that's one thing that we need to know. So, when we talk about transiting to becoming a full-fledged politician, I don't know what it means, quite honestly, because even to succeed as a technocrat or a public servant that I was required a bit of politics. Politics is about give and take. But you must just be clear-eyed about what are the things you cannot compromise and you should not compromise on, but rather you must learn the art of negotiating to convince and just know what I had. So we did a whole lot of that. It wasn't easy navigating the National Assembly and all that, and for a program where everybody was really quite vested in. I mean, and that's a politician in me, right? But I'm a public servant, and what holds after now? Let's keep that to another conversation.
It's been a pleasure speaking with you for almost an hour, more than number of minutes more than we planned. Yeah. Thank you very much. We wish you all the best in your subsequent endeavors.
Thanks. Sir.
Yes, it's been a pleasure doing this on the follow-up. I've been speaking to Mr. Afolabi Imoukhuede. Mr. Afolabi Imoukhuede is the former senior special assistant to former President Muhammadu Buhari on job creation. He is presently strategic partnership lead in the Office of the Vice President on Partnerships and Coordination. He is the brain behind the N-Power program. And we've been having a conversation about Nigeria's human capital sector and the things needed to fix the challenges therein. Until next time, I am Sam Ogboi. Keep listening to Adami Mogo 93.1 FM. Thank you.
Adami Mogo 93.1 FM.